All right. Hi, everybody. This is Martha Creek. It's 2020, the year 2020. So if you're listening to this 2,000 years later, you'll know that we did a fantastic job. My vision is that we can get you, me, whoever's listening, whoever's leading, teaching, being, expressing, can get empowered teachings to the whole of the planet, to the whole of humanity. So this is offered today in accordance with that vision and the devotion in my heart to make it so. And I've reached out to people that are near and dear to me that I believe live a very, very purposeful life and live their lives on purpose. And I have a dear friend of over 20 years, Reverend McLean, here with me today. And we're going to open this up to see where we go. And as you're listening, marthacreek.com is the way to contact me with my email, phone number, anything is there. There's also free videos, podcast, anything. You're welcome to use it, teach it, speak it, duplicate it, give it away, do anything you can. And this is offered with the same generosity of heart, this little podcast today in this video. So thank you, my friend, for saying yes to this.
Thank you for asking me, my goodness, Martha. Yes.
Reverend John is serving currently in the Unity of Nashville, and that's a dear community to me too. And I happen to be in the vicinity now of Nashville again, which I've considered home for many years. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious about insights you have about organizations, John, and what you're noticing. What's been the what do you think the next iteration of this is of ministry? You've served well and very purposeful in ministry for 20 years now, roundabout, and you've succeeded. You have left every ministry better and better and better. So what can you share here with folks that may be curious, or what you believe from your own experience and what you're intuitively aware of?
Great. That's such a great question. Thank you for asking it. And thanks again for inviting me. I really appreciate it, Martha. Of course, all of us, and I know that all the professional conversations that you have with people that reach out to you, be they board members or friends or ministers in the field, the way you support us all, I don't hear people asking what seems to be a critically important question for me. And this is what I'm thinking about right now, is that I know that we have a lot of energy about wanting to go back to normal. And when are things going to be normal? When is it going to be the way it used to be? And the question I keep asking myself, without any being hyperbolic around it or super rah-rah or Tony Robbins about the whole thing. But I don't want to go back to anything. And I don't want to go forward to resume what we were doing. But I feel this is such a spacious moment for us to be bringing in what's going to be the next new awesome. I feel very conscious that, church doing has not changed in at least 2,500 years. Because even in the Psalms, it says, get the tambourines and get the bugles and let's go to the temple and give them some money and they will tell me what the rules are. And that's still the same infrastructure. So when I think about the way we church now, I used to think about that expression, the way we church now, in terms of the way it's going to be 30 years from now. But I know, what we thought we could put off for 30 years, we need to be making decisions today. I don't want to be cynical and say it kind of called our bluff in this illusion of time. But when we have this feeling that this moment is rife with opportunity, then this is the right time to be moving forward. So I think that there are components about the next awesome. And of course, if I had answers, I would be wealthy, right? And I don't have answers. But this goes into something that I've thought about a great deal for a long period of time. And Martha, stop me if I'm using imagery or something that's not really super clear.
Well, this is clear and very direct, which I prefer and value.
Okay.
I believe the listeners will. So whoever it's read will be delighted at how clear and specific.
Okay. The one thing that I have felt that there has been a weakness in our New Thought communities. And when we say that, I think you and I are talking about the same thing. We're talking about religious science, Centers for Spiritual Living. We're talking about divine science communities. We're talking about unity communities, and their loose affiliations, individual teachers around there. Is that originally, it is rumored that both Ernest Holmes and the Fillmore said, whatever you do, don't make it a church. And if that is true, I don't know if it's true or not, or if it's apocryphal, but if it's true that they knew that this was a teaching, and it is more like school than it is like church. And when you blend them both, you're going to lose critical components of it. And I feel, let's not be bleak, but there's a softness in our movement now, and there has been for about 20 years. And yet the teachings are still critically important for the emotional, spiritual growth of all human beings, for the regaining of spiritual capital and social capital. These teachings are very, very basic stuff and very, very important. And yet it's gotten soft with making a teaching to be more like a church and making a church to be something that's not as effective as it could be, because we have no unit of account. And this, oddly, it's a cause and effect world, right? And we have a teaching that says, well, this is the way the world works, and I'm not going to tell you that you have to do it, but you might want to think about it. That doesn't work in an environment we call a church. And I've always felt that if you want to call it a spiritual center, that's fine, but it really isn't. It looks like a church. It costs like a church. It quacks like a church. It's a church. But what our communities are not is that they are not places where we are on the same page in terms of our vision of life, in terms of the utility of our community, in terms of what we stand for. And I have felt that there is weakness that comes with this. On the occasion when I'll talk about nonviolence or peacemaking, and I don't a lot, but when we celebrated Gandhi's birthday last year, I talked about it a lot. Well, you know, if you say that nonviolent resistance and peacemaking is an option to what is going on, there's a lot of people in our churches that laugh and they don't take it seriously, but nobody does that in a Quaker community. They know what their life is devoted to. And in a regard like that, it has nothing to do with the Bible. It has nothing to do with the Jesus. It says, this is our stand. This is our commitment on planet Earth. And I see those communities where they do have a commitment to similar practice, seem to be communities that are very strong. And the ones that are not committed to practice are not that effective, really, in helping people transform into the higher expression that they might be seeking. So the way we church now is, I think it's going to be, and we're seeing it happen right now, Martha, where a lot of teachers are making their offerings online who used to be senior ministers in larger churches. They're all going solo. And I don't know if it's super clear. I'm going to talk to the audience about what Reverend Martha Creek does, but that she has been such a phenomenal support from the very, very beginning of her personal ministry to individuals, that we might be more effective in delivering the message that we hope to deliver. And oddly enough, I feel that Reverend Martha has pioneered the new church. So the example is there for all of us if we want to see what we can do when we have a clear vision. And now everybody has the tools. I mean, none of us imagined this even 10 years ago. There wasn't a smartphone 10 years ago. Computers were still fairly new when I was in school in the year 2000. And we're a whole generation past that now. And I don't think we're taking advantage of what the given is and what is possible with really modest means, right? How impactful one can be with extremely modest means for the individual. But then on the other hand, we still have these hundreds of communities, probably between religious science and the CSL and Unity. You know, there are 800 to 1,000 churches in the whole country, North America, right? About that. And yet we do have these communities. And what's the best possible use of those assets? And I personally feel we got to get clear on that. Toot sweet. And know that what is it that we're coming back to? And how will it be better than it was before? How will the gathering be enriched? Now, I don't have the hard answer for that. But that's the question that is like tattooed on my forehead. So every time I'm on a Zoom with anybody, it reminds me, oh, we're doing our work now like this. And I need to have on a clean shirt and comb my hair. I don't need 10 acres of land, but is there a great use for that? And when we come together, what is the best possible reason for that? Sit, please. This is my St. Francis cup. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace.
Amen.
Don't make me hurt nobody today. Early in my work life, I worked at a federal agency, the National Endowment for the Arts, and at that moment there was a program that assisted real estate developers in selecting art for their public environments. And I met an artist once who was very skilled at making presentations in this realm. And he wasn't talking about a church, but he was talking about office buildings and public plazas and whatnot. And when he spoke to people that were the users of the space, the main question is, who are we when we are here? And you know, these simple questions are the most profound ones. And that goes back to 1976 for me. So that's the very beginning of my work life. And that's a question that is so critically important that, first of all, the church is the we of me. And who are we corporately when we are here? We are our highest aspirations. We are our most noble ambitions. And how does that outpicture? How is that reflected in every single choice that is made, including the color of the paint? Every single choice, from computer-wise, from hardware to software, from the building to the program. And I do believe this is the question that needs to be answered immediately, so that when we come back, we will have a clarity and a demand on consciousness for the individual that's never really been asked for. Because also at this point, our facilities, we don't have the volunteers the way we used to, and there's no such thing as a church lady, because every grandmother in America, as everybody knows, is performing the role of the mother, of taking the kids to all their appointments and to soccer and to the clarinet lessons. So every grandmother is busy. They don't hang out at a church anymore. So that expectation of, can't you just find somebody? They're busy. So these are costly enterprises, and I think they have enormous value. They have enormous value. So I am, Martha in her way, and me in my way, and everybody else in the church in their way. We made this choice because we understand the value of community.
Yeah. Well, there's several things about you, John, that I love and appreciate. And one of them is your reference for the teaching, and that it's the teaching that holds power, and it's the teaching that is the solid ground for living. And for whatever degree, and I absolutely concur, the way you described it today is soft, and it's gotten soft, and you presented it as like a weakened foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Visually. And I call it's gone spirituality light.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That then what is something that can be done that we may do, I may do, you may do, the leaders of this is. So, I presented information from Ed Friedman as clergy, Roberta Gilbert, the people from Georgetown, Healthy Congregations, Clergy Clinics, Lombard Mennonite Peace Center, people I've worked with over the years. And they believed, some of these leaders, these authors, that clergy was the hope of society.
Mm.
The profession of clergy held more potential for societal progression and some antidote for societal regression.
Yeah.
And I can't see it either if there's not what was your word, like a devotion to consciousness or a commitment.
A demand on consciousness, yeah.
Demand on consciousness and an application of the teaching. And what I've witnessed, and I'm party to it, I'm guilty of it at times, of being able to quote the teaching and quote somebody and do this. It's another thing entirely to live devotionally and to live with conscious contact with that. So where's the hope?
The hope is in smaller groups. And, I say that like I know. Friends, I don't know. The hope is in the smaller group. If there is deep meaning in the myth, Jesus had 12. 12 is enough. 12 is enough. And I've actually spoken about this with other friends because I come from a recovery background, as so many unity ministers do, because we get it. We know that our life depends on living according to principle. Maybe the new model is that there should simply be small groups that gather all over the world, and one has devotion to one's home group the way one does in 12-step. And then maybe the great advantage of going to rallies or gatherings or conventions and in 12-step work is that once a year you get to see this. There's this enormous group, and you're part of a worldwide movement. And once a year, everybody should go to Unity Village and see that. But unless we really want to be schools, the way schools are happening now, I don't know that there's a long-term use for traditional worship, because it continues to operate. And I'm saying all my transgressive stuff here, things I shouldn't say out loud. There's an archetypal pull that when you walk into something like a church on a Sunday morning, it better be a church. And there's simply something that makes us want to go there. And that's not really the main purpose. The main purpose is, tell me about your experience, what you hope for. Here's the principle. How can I support you one-on-one in bringing any, as my teacher, Dr. David Walker, told me, to bring any idea to its fullest expression. And then there is a thrill about knowing that there are people all over the place that are playing this way and to the same effect, but it seems to be a more reasonable way, especially with the efficacy now of digital community and digital communication.
So certainly some expansion, some expanded limits.
Yep.
And, even mega churches over the years, I used to go and listen to them and their secrets, and often the answer simplified. It could take a few hours, but the simplified answer was small groups, smaller groups, and where people actually feel like they belong, and that people have their backs and they're being prayed for, they're being cared for, they're caring for each other. So they're getting some emotional aspect met, some mental aspect met, some social aspects met, and it doesn't fall on the responsibility of an organization, which, who could argue with the church as an organization is not sustainable. That with the decline that we've seen just since you and I have been in this arena for a little over 20 years, like there's measurable decline. And I remember being in Montreal a few years ago and on this tour, and they were like, this is so-and-so church, now it's condos. This is so-and-so church, now it's condos. After the third one, I'm like, is all the churches condos? Like,
that's true in Scotland as well, because the country owned all the churches and they're not being used. So they're community art centers and they're mini breweries. That's the best repurposing for traditional churches. To have my mini craft breweries. Yeah.
So, and of course, the facade stayed the same. So your questions are so profound to me, John, when we think about like, what was the thinking that got us 10 acres, 20 acres, 50 acres to have a teaching? Even to go back to our roots, that if it's true, cautioned us, this is not a church, don't make a church out of it. And now here we are 150 years later, 125 years later, with some property and some churches. And every day this week, I got 2 more calls that 2 more buildings were sold, 2 more churches have been sold, 2 more groups are going to be looking for a place to meet and how they're going to meet and what the next iteration of it is. So I love your reference for that, which is what I say it similarly. What is the next greatest iteration of ourselves? What is the next greatest iteration of community, of spiritual community? And you're awesome. And I love the word. And it's like, what is our next awesome going to look like? So none of us have answers, that's for sure. John and I wouldn't claim to have any answers for anybody, and often for ourselves even. And the questions, I think, for all of you. So anybody listening, you're encouraged here. And John, if you can take another few minutes to speak about that, I think what I'd want myself as a student and as a practitioner to hear you speak a little bit about the vital, critical importance of practice, of application. So it's one of my favorite things about you, besides what you say about other people, is that they love God. And you do. And it means the world to me. So speak a little bit about that practice. What you think is, if you don't want a softer center or a less stable, I call it solid ground. If you want a life that can be experienced and live more on a solid ground, then speak about that.
Thank you. You know, when I, even before, long before I saw myself as a minister, I was devoted to my Los Angeles Church of Religious Science, devoted. And I would think about the model of it and how it works and why it works, or maybe what could be better. And at one time, I remember someone saying to me, if you had a church, wouldn't you love to have like 1,000 people? And I said, oh no. I said, I've always been a boutique, and I've never been a department store. I would rather have 12 people that were demonstrating than 1,000 observers, because there would be a celebration amongst ourselves always of seeing our lives move forward in whatever way that is, in the healing of the body and the creation of relationships and business opportunities, but to see that life would be going forward and would not be stuck in a format would be more interesting to me. Now, I'm aware of this because in retrospect, that's pretty much the way I've conducted myself, irrespective of where I've been or what the situation has been. And because of that, it has been deeply rewarding to me. My early training in religious science was foundational or very formative to me. And yet I wouldn't have had the vision to be a minister if it hadn't been for unity. So I have just unbounded affection and respect for both traditions. I really, really do. But in the Centers for Spiritual Living, there is such a focus on getting it and applying it. And that's where my soul needed to be when I was first starting out. And that has never left me. That every day I have the opportunity to be here. You know, Martha, you've been here. I mean, I'm very lucky. I have a beautiful church and lovely grounds and that kind of thing. And I'm the luckiest guy in the world that I get to be here. But I ask myself all the time, what am I bringing forth that's important, that adds to the mission and the effectiveness of the mission, that adds to its beauty as well as its utility? How are we applying this place for good and not just stopping and whining because, well, I don't have the money. I've always had the money to keep it alive and moving forward, because it needs to be. I've told this story a bunch of times and I don't mind telling it again. James Dillard Freeman was still living when I was in school. He passed shortly thereafter. But this hit me like a ton of bricks, because somebody asked him a question and the way he answered it was by saying, you know, in the last couple of years of Charles Fillmore's life, no matter what anybody asked him, he would only say, tell me what you're working on right now. Because it doesn't matter what anybody thinks. Metaphysical Bible interpretation is a lovely tool. It doesn't matter, though, what the interpretation of the name Hezekiah is. Who cares? But I care about where you are and what you're thinking about today and what you're working on. Relieving yourself of, healing, or bringing something brand new into creation. And let me stand in fierce affirmation of yes with you for that. That's what I feel my job is, what the purpose of ministry is. But yeah, regular, real, dedicated, devoted contemplation, consideration on a daily basis. It's like any art form, and metaphysics is a craft, and it must be practiced every day like a violin until you display what appears to be effortless mastery. And we call that demonstrations or something, right? When you don't appear to be putting in that same amount of work right this very second, but there are things that just happen so easily. It appears to be effortless mastery, but it's because of a lifetime of devotion. And, you know, I don't mean sitting in the silence for hours a day, however it works for you, to be anchored in the truth, not your truth. Can I do a finger wagging thing?
Absolutely.
Can I say there's no such thing as my truth?
And can I say amen?
You have your experience, which I honor, but there is the truth. Because the ability to go into my truth has led us to the inevitable consequence of alternative facts. And that's not working for us.
Well, and then under some spell that what I just declared to be my truth is the truth, and not keeping a clear distinction between that's an
the two. Yeah. So I went on a tangent, as I do every single Sunday. Sorry about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was counting on it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. But commitment to practice, steadfastness, even the simplest of commitments. I know what I've learned is when you keep your commitment, spiritual growth happens. When you keep your commitment. And if that's showing up for a Zoom on Sunday morning as church, it is the keeping of the commitment that keeps our abilities strong and ready to be used.
Yeah. Well, I hope, listeners, that something here has moved you back to your own practice. And that takeaway right there, that's a great summary, John. Commitment, keeping our commitments, and no measure of how large or small is the basis for this progression, for spiritual solid ground, spiritual progression, and being, expressing, creating, living the life of integrity for yourself.
Yeah.
So commit to something.
Yeah.
And stay with it. And you'll find every reason in the world to do something else. So it's no little thing. So as simple as that sounds, it's another thing entirely to live it out. So John and I both have a great deal of hope in you, listeners, as we have a lot of hope in ourselves. Mm-hmm. And absolutely has come through decades of our own practice.
Yeah.
Sitting ourselves in a chair and calming down and taking a few deep breaths, contemplation and meditation and other things. So we're here. I love how you said that, John. See if you can say it again, that we want to be John and me and some of your teachers, some of your mentors, some of your coaches and colleagues stand with you right here and right now to be your affirmative, awesome, clear yes. Once you get clear and precise about what you're working on right now,
right,
what you're healing, what you're willing to transcend, transform, process through, and what you're creating and bringing forth.
Yeah.
So we stand with you individually. John just said it. I know that about him to be true in his own demonstrations and in my experience of him. And I stand with you in that. So tell folks how to get in touch with you, John, if they want to be supported by you, follow you in ministry, anything like that.
Right now, while I'm here, it's office at unityofnashville.org. is simple enough, office@unityofnashville.org. And
There you
that's
go. And my marthacreek.com here. And any way we can support you, personally, professionally, spiritually, there's some opening here for that. So bless you as you proceed, that you find purpose in your own life. And I've not said it lately, but today it seems like how I would define purpose is that you're putting a element of delight in your practice and what you do, that you're clear about that, why you're doing what you're doing, and that you know with certainty that it's beneficial to you and to others, if there's quantum theory is true, and that you continue to work with yourself and work for yourself in your own truth and integrity. So,
right on.
Till we meet again, my friend. Thank you again for this time and this day, and for the way you're serving God and humanity.
Thanks for the invitation, Martha.
Bye.
Much love. Bye-bye.